Hi again, everyone. So in this video, I want to do a quick overview on my IBM PS2 Model 77, a 486 DX2 66 megahertz machine. Now this machine doesn't normally come with a CD-ROM drive. I ended up having to kind of rig something together. And by rig, I mean I just stuck it in there. I can't find any mounting rails or proper way to mount this in there, and I don't have a 3D printer, so it's just kind of sitting there. And it's held in by the cable and the power cable and the data cable in the back. So, I mean, it'll stay, but it is what it is. So let's take a look on the inside. So here we are on the inside. The cables are all in the way. You know, cable management was not really a thing. You can barely make out down there the heat sink that's sitting on top of the DX266 processor. There it is. My camera's, there we go, finally it focuses. And of course this is using SCSI. Sorry, I had to move the camera so I could fix the cable that was coming out. This is using onboard SCSI, so that makes the system overall faster. And I'm actually using a pretty fast 2 gig drive in this system. And of course, since this is a 486, it can utilize the full 32-bit MCA slots, which were much faster, matched the speed of Visa Local Bus, which I believe also matched the speed of PCI. But the downside was you had to use adapter configuration files or ADF files, and you had to boot from a floppy to make any configuration changes. It wasn't stored in BIOS or in a CMOS area that was backed up by RAM. No, it was all stored on floppy drive, and you had to keep your floppy drive present. So I do have my IBM LAN adapter a 10 megabit adapter, which is beautiful, works great in here. For my networking to the rest of my network. I have yet another ReSound New Wave for audio because they're just easier to obtain than trying to find a MCA-based Sound Blaster card. So that makes two that I've purchased, one for my 386, one for my 486, and actually I have a third one for my 286 that I'm currently having problems with. And then, of course, we do have an XGA-2 card in here. And I've installed 32 megs of RAM, which I think was the max for this planner or motherboard. IBM preferred calling them planners for some reason. Whatever. But this is a very nice system. I really like it. It's very well built, very easy to maintain, and once again, I find MCA so fascinating, despite the drawbacks of having to use a boot floppy to configure the system. The system itself, the automatic configuration, the interface, it is quite fascinating for what it was for the time. Now this system, of course, is actually running OS2 Warp Connect, which is OS2 version 3. Let's go ahead and take a look and explore some of what OS2 3 has to offer. Alright, got the tripod all set up here. I'm pressing the power button now. And let's take a look. Should go through its RAM counts if it ever makes up its mind here. There we go. Oh, we are missing part of the screen. There we go. See if I can adjust this just a tiny bit. Nope, that's about as good as I'm going to get. Okay. So 32,384, normally 32,768 is 32 megs. I don't know where the other 512 kilobytes went. OS2 version 3 has a nice little boot logo now. It's around the time when everybody was starting to add, startup messages, starting MS-DOS, starting Windows 95. OS2 just had that OS2 in the corner there. Now, what I particularly like about the OS2 Warp Connect version is that it has built-in networking features. I actually also have OS2 Warp before Connect, and it is very difficult to network, in my opinion, at least with IBM networking add-ons. You can use the Microsoft OS2 add-on, although I also had problems getting that to work under OS2 3. It looks like it was actually written for OS2 2. So I don't know, Warp Connect is just so much easier to work with as far as networking is concerned. That sound is so faint. You're not getting the full experience. There we go. I think I actually have to update all the network drives because in OS2 they are persistent, and I've since switched legacy file servers. I had to virtualize mine. Couldn't afford the electricity on the Dell rack mount server I was running, so I had to kind of put that to bed and virtualize it. But here we are. It's very much like OS2 2, but they introduced this dock, which I really like. I think it's a great addition. It was different. And as far as I know, this is the first time a dock was ever introduced in the PC marketplace. This was before Netscape. This was before Netscape was purchased by Apple, and Apple started using a dock. IBM actually had a dock. And you can add buttons here, like I've actually added the networking log on and log off functions here. You have, your OS2 session, your DOS session, both full screen and windowed. And you have your list of drives here. Your CD-ROM drive, your C drive, your floppy drive. So, it's very convenient. And if I wanted to, I can right-click and drag something else down here to add to the dock, and the dock will automatically expand to accept it. I haven't tried pushing it. I haven't tried filling it up to see what happens if you reach all the way to the end. I'm not interested in, UI testing an OS that's no longer in support. But I do find this fascinating. I did install Star Office, which I believe came on CD-ROM with OS2 Warp Connect. And for funsies, I did install the Word version of OS2 Word on here. I also installed Open Wacom because I found it fascinating that version 1.9 actually had an OS2 component. So I was like, let's install it to see what happens. And who knows, maybe I might get some inspiration to write some OS2 applications or utilities. I created my own documents folder here for anything I was working on. I was playing around with a bunch of different things, created a database file, created a Word document, downloads because I was copying things from my network share, but I could install things. As you can see, I have Netscape Communicator installed for OS2. There was a Firefox for OS2 that was available. But just like Windows 3.1 and early 95, the majority of the web doesn't work on here because standards have moved well beyond what OS2 Warp 3 is capable of with, modern TSL or TLS connections. OS2 doesn't even know what TLS is. So, but it's still fun. It's still fascinating, but the majority of the operating system is the same. In order to move things, I have to right-click and drag. I can't left-click and drag. And same thing with all the windows here. This will minimize. This won't close. I see a lot of people who are playing around with OS2 on YouTube that click this, and it goes away, so they think this is the close button. But all you're doing is you're leaving the window running in a minimized fashion. and you don't have a taskbar down here to see that it's still running, so it's out of sight, out of mind. But that consumes memory, and if you do that too many times, you could, your system will start bogging down because you have too much open. Each little window requires so much RAM and so much resources. A few windows opening is not going to bog down your system, but if you keep doing this over an extended period of time, I can see your system bogging down most definitely. I don't believe I dual booted this one, so I should not have the dual boot feature like I do on my 386 IBM, my SLC2. This is straight up OS2 Warp Connect installed on its own by itself, and I think I even installed HPFS because my disk is more than large enough to handle it, and I wasn't worried about backwards compatibility. And I just find HPFS so fascinating. Again, I like to do something a little different with each one of my systems, just because why not? These technologies were interesting, and having each system just slightly different gives it something unique to be in my collection. And if I ever want to, I don't know, write a utility that I want to test against, I have all these systems that I can test against, that each one that's slightly different. I can test something against HPFS. Why is it not showing current disk usage? Oh, the disk light is still going off. It's still checking. It is a 2 gig drive, which is pretty big for the time. And I still have 1.8 gig free, so barely anything on this system because there's not too many OS2 applications, to be perfectly honest. And even Windows 3.1 applications weren't very large at the time. And so you're just not going to fill 2 gigs worth of data, not very easily anyways. But it's fun. I like to have it's amazing to have a 2 gig drive with HPFS. Now, HPFS is a precursor to Windows NT's NTFS. In fact, early versions of Windows NT from like NT 3.1, 3.5, and 3.5.1 all actually supported being installed on an HPFS file system. I believe it wasn't until NT4 where they removed that ability to be installed onto an HPFS file system. Now, that isn't to say that HPFS and NTFS are exactly the same. It's my understanding, according to the developers, NTFS was written from the ground up to be different, though I've heard from other people that it actually is just an evolution of HPFS. Once IBM and Microsoft had their falling out, supposedly Microsoft just renamed HPFS to NTFS to reflect being used on their new NT operating system. So I don't know what the truth is, but it's fascinating nonetheless. You don't get to see HPFS on too many systems anymore. You don't even get to see OS2 on many systems anymore. But I noticed, did my drives reconnect? No, they didn't. I do need to log on. I think this was the logon command. I don't like that it doesn't show you any characters while typing. It would be nice to at least show asterisks, but logon was successful. But it's not going to map my drives because I changed servers, so I have to kill all the net use connections. I'm not going to bore you with doing them all. I just want to take a look. Yeah, no entries in list. And will it work? Normally I have I map to images. Yep, so that works. So it's just a matter of me having to update all of my network connections. So there's not really that much to go through in OS2 Warp 3 that I didn't do in my OS2 Warp 2 video. It's much the same. It has multimedia built in. You can actually do video files. And I don't know why this is all scrunched together. Yeah, see, this one, the integration worked a lot better with Windows 3.1. I can, once again, I can run Windows 3.1 applications directly from here. It's going to be a little bit faster than my 386, of course, because this is a 486, but it does start a full copy of Windows in the background before it runs the application. And then this is a full-fledged Windows 3.1 application running seamlessly under OS 2 with the Windows 3.1 interface because it's actually running in the background. And this was one of the reasons why a lot of people, or a lot of developers, didn't bother writing native OS 2 applications. Why double your support efforts and your writing efforts if you can just make a Windows 3.1 application and it'll very likely work under OS 2? You can just run it in a OS 2 session instead. So really the only benefit of owning OS 2 at the time was a more stable system, since DOS and Windows 3.1 were inherently less stable because they were very constrained on resources. OS 2 doesn't suffer from those same constraints. And so you really bought yourself a very solid and stable DOS and Windows system with OS 2. That isn't a diss on OS 2. It is a great operating system. I really like using it. I really think it's fascinating for what it was during its time. Not to mention that I think I actually prefer File Manager over IBM's multiple windows piling up all over the place to browse drives. And as you'll see, there's no 3D6 Enhanced again in the control panel, just like under OS 2.2, because you're not running in 3D6 Enhanced mode. You are running as a client under OS 2 in OS 2's protected mode. So this is a slightly modified version of Windows 3, well, 3.1, just like what runs under OS 2 2.1. But it's a little bit more refined, has a few extra features. I don't know if I would have considered this a whole new version. I don't know if I would have called it OS 2.3. But I guess they were quick to want to show that it was improved over version 2. This would have been more like a 2.5 to me, but, you know. And we do have the system information tool here. I believe this is the original from 1994. I don't think this is the patched version. I don't remember. Recognizes it that it's my model 77. And it recognizes that I have my LAN adapter A in here. It doesn't know what the resound new wave is, which is interesting because I would have thought that it pulled the information, like it queried the information from the adapter file or that's been loaded for it, but I guess not. I guess it actually has to know what each adapter file is before it can display it. And of course, this utility was written well before the resound new wave was released. And then it recognizes my XGA-2 display adapter and all the other built-in functions, you know, serial, parallel, the SCSI that's built in. Let's take a look. 2 million bytes. Yeah, I like how they did that. 2.1 million bytes or 2 megabytes. So they tried to draw the distinction between decimal and binary values, which I find interesting and good, because the whole decimal versus binary caused a lot of confusion. I worked at a reseller way back in the year 2000, and I had some pretty angry people who had like purchased a hard drive, and they insisted we cheated them because it wasn't the advertised size when they installed it in their system, formatted their system, because Windows shows the binary value and not the decimal value. And I believe there was even a class action lawsuit against many drive manufacturers back in the day because of this issue. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. My memory's a little rusty and I didn't research it before this video. But it definitely caused some confusion and people were definitely upset about it. I didn't like dealing with the angry people calling in. I didn't like having to explain to them that it was the same amount. And even after I explained it to them, they were still irate and still insistent that we cheated them, even though I proved to them that the values were the same. I can calculate out exactly what his display said without even him telling me what his display said, down to the byte. And I'm saying his as if it was one person. It wasn't one person. And it didn't matter. No amount of reasoning seemed to work, so it caused all sorts of confusion. Operating system information. This is curious that it calls itself OS2 version 2.30, but this is OS2 Warp Connect 3.0, so I'm not sure what's up with that. Component SD levels. Netscape Communicator 4.61. Yeah, just kind of going through and showing off some of the information that you can see from the system information tool, and just kind of giving an idea of what's in the system as reported. I find system information programs so fascinating for some strange reason. So, you know, this is a fascinating system, and that's the reason why it's in my collection. Not to mention I might use it as a development system sometime in the future. Maybe I'll get inspired to write an OS2 application or two. But lastly, I want to run Netscape and see if I can actually... Why is it not running? I want to see if I can load up... there we go. It's just going a little slow. And we load FrogFind. Love this site. Once again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Thank you so much, Action Retro, for making this. It's a great landing page for me. And let's see if I can reach my own Dobson Utilities website, shelteringoak.com/du. It's thinking. Loading. And there we go. In Netscape Navigator, we can visit my Dobson Utilities homepage. Maybe one day this will be OS2 as well. So that's the video. It does have internet connectivity, but obviously you can't visit most modern sites. It just simply isn't going to work. But this is such a fascinating system. I really am impressed with what MCA and what IBM brought to the table. I understand why the rest of the industry said, thanks, but no thanks. With IBM's royalties, they wanted to charge you for every MCA system you make, and they also wanted to back charge you royalties for every ISA system you made, because they really wanted to regain control of the market, and they were very upset about everybody copying what they had made. But that's what happens when you use off-the-shelf components and you don't make them all proprietary. But I still think overall it was good for the industry that IBM did that, whether they lost control or not, whether they're angry about it or not. I think overall the way things happened really helped the industry boom, and it caused the best boom in the industry. That's why I think the golden age of computing for me is 84 to 96. About a 12-year span. It would be my favorite decade, a little over a decade. So yeah, that's this video. That's a quick look at OS2. That was a quick look at the internals of my Model 77 DX266 running here. If you liked it, if you found it entertaining, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, by all means, give it a thumbs down. Apparently it does nothing to the algorithm other than tell the algorithm that you don't want any more videos like this. Totally understand. But if you did like it, I'd appreciate the thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, I typically, right now, I'm showing off all the PCs in my collection, one by one, talking about what's unique with each of them, and showing how each of them are slightly different. And then, you know, I plan on doing a few other types of videos too. I plan on doing some programming videos eventually, watching me write a program or write a function or something. I also intend on doing. I have some gaming videos up, gaming from older games, even gaming from current new games. I plan on doing both because this is Charlie's Digital Adventures, and I do a little bit of old and new. So if you want to see more content like that, by all means, give me a subscription. It'll encourage me to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'd like to see people come along with me for the ride on our adventure. Thank you.
Ciao.